Bring in the man whose team spent 10 years on the Clinton money trail, Peter Schweizer, author of Clinton Cash. And welcome to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Let's start with the phrase that Brett mentioned that you use in the book, the Clinton blur, the mix of private and public, of charity and government action. What's your point?
The point is basically when former President Clinton travels the world, which he does extensively, he spends time in the developing world and in Europe. When he goes there, he's usually wearing several hats. When his wife was in public office, he's obviously the spouse of a very powerful public figure. He's the head of a charity. He's also giving speeches. And he's probably there with an entourage that includes foreign businessmen that have matters before the government in Colombia or Kazakhstan or wherever it may be. And the problem is when you have a mix of public and private profit-making backed by the government power that your spouse has, I think it creates a very dangerous cocktail as far as conflict of interest is concerned.
Well, you have an interesting point that I want to put up on the screen that seems to demonstrate exactly the point you're making. Between 2001 and 2012, Bill Clinton made 13 speeches, 13 for which he was paid $500,000 or more. 11 of those 13 speeches were at least 8 years after he left the presidency while his wife was Secretary of State. Peter, what do you think that shows?
Well, I think you can only come to one of two conclusions. Either in January of 2009, when Hillary Clinton becomes Secretary of State, former President Clinton has become dramatically more eloquent than he ever was. And he's a very eloquent man.
Because his speaking fees went dramatically up.
Dramatically. I mean, for example, in the uranium deal, there's a $500,000 speech that he is paid by an investment banking firm that is tied to Putin. He was paid $500,000. He'd only given one speech in Russia before that, 5 years earlier, for which he was paid a third of that. So the question becomes, why did his speaking fees go up, and why did it go up with corporations and with individuals and with people connected to foreign governments who had business before the State Department?
And what's your answer?
My answer is that's extremely troubling, especially the fact that you find it's a very extensive pattern. This is not one or two examples. There are 11 instances, and I think when you have one or two examples, it's coincidence. When you have this many, to me, it's a trend.
Okay, let's go through a timeline, and it's complicated, but a timeline of the uranium deal that Brett mentioned and you report in the book. 2005, Bill Clinton and Canadian millionaire Frank Giustra fly to Kazakhstan. Giustra lands a big uranium mining deal. Giustra gives the Clinton Foundation $31 million and later pledges $100 million more. 2010, a Russian company wants to buy Uranium One, which has taken over Giustra's company. The new chairman of Uranium One donates $2 million to the Clinton Foundation, which fails to report that money. In June of 2010, Bill Clinton gets $500,000 for a speech in Moscow. In October, a U.S. government committee approves the sale of Uranium One to the Russian company. Question, is there a connection between all of those millions of dollars that are going to Clinton personally and to the Clinton Foundation and the State Department's approval of this uranium deal?
I believe there is. And it's not just Frank Giustra. As I lay out in the book, there are actually nine major donors to the Clinton Foundation who have written multi-million-dollar checks that are tied to this deal. The two financial advisors that arranged for the sale of Uranium One to the Russian government, they're both major Clinton contributors. The chairman of the company is. Some of the key shareholders are. The question becomes, when CFIUS approved this transfer in October, what role did Hillary Clinton play?
Okay, and CFIUS is that committee that approves in October of 2010 the sale to Russia, or to a Russian company with close ties to Vladimir Putin. This is precisely the point that the Clinton campaign has hit back on hard, because CFIUS is a committee of 9 agencies, not just the State Department. It's 9 separate agencies, and they point out that there is no hard evidence, and you don't cite any in the book, that Hillary Clinton took direct action, was involved in any way in approving, as one of 9 agencies, the sale of the company.
Well, here's what's important to keep in mind. It was one of 9 agencies, but any one of those agencies had veto power. So she could have stopped the deal. What's interesting about this is, of all those 9 agencies, who was the most hawkish on these types of issues? Hillary Clinton. She had a reputation going back to the Dubai port deal. At this time also in 2000...
We should just quickly point out, this is what I think in 2005, that the United Arab Emirates are buying several American ports. She was then a U.S. senator, and she said we shouldn't have foreign companies buying huge U.S. assets.
Yes, critical assets, and I think uranium would fit that bill. What's also happening in 2010, basically they're claiming she didn't know about this deal. In 2010, when this deal is going down, she is responsible for the A123 civilian nuclear negotiations with the Russian government. She is point person on the Russian reset. You've got 4 senior members of Congress who have written a letter expressing concerns about this deal.
But again, if I may, you don't have a single piece of evidence that she was involved in this deal, that she sent a memo to the person, the State Department representative who was on this committee and said, hey, we want to approve the uranium one sale.
I am a journalist, and so I don't have access to government records. I certainly don't have access to her emails. It doesn't seem like anybody does. But the fundamental question is, with this deal and with the others that we cite in the book, is it coincidence? Is it coincidence in a pattern that we see repeated dozens of times, where large Clinton supporters have business before the State Department, they make large payments, and favorable actions are taken? I don't think that coincidences occur that frequently.
All right, let's take another one of your case studies, and that is Haiti after the devastating earthquake there in 2010. And Bill Clinton goes to Haiti, and it becomes co-chair of the Haitian Relief Committee, which approved millions of dollars in new projects, part of the relief. In 2010 and 11, Digicel, a mobile phone company, gets more than $2 million in U.S. taxpayer money to set up a money transfer program in Haiti. The company's owner, Irish billionaire Dennis O'Brien, arranges 4 speeches for Bill Clinton for $825,000. He also contributes between $1 and $5 million, because that's the disclosure. It's no more definite than that, between $1 and $5 million for the Clinton Foundation. Peter, again, it doesn't look good, but what evidence do you have that Bill Clinton helped, first of all, that he did anything to steer this project to Digicel, and that he did it in return for the good auspices of this Irish billionaire who got him all these speeches? Well,
again, I was not subject to conversations they had. I did not have access to internal memos. But again, you see this pattern of benefit. And I think that's really the key question here. The analogy I would use is a little bit like insider trading. I wrote a book a couple years ago on members of Congress who were potentially engaging in insider trading. And when you talk to prosecutors, they will tell you most people that engage in insider trading don't send an email that says, I've got inside information, buy this stock. The way they get prosecuted is by looking at a pattern of behavior. Did somebody with access to the information conduct a series of well-timed stock trades that warrants further investigation? And that's my contention here, that you see a series of actions that are enormously beneficial. In some cases, Hillary Clinton is reversing course on policies that she embraced before for the benefit of Clinton donors, and I'm saying this warrants investigation.
Do you think, you're not a lawyer, and as you say, it warrants further investigation. Do you think the Clintons committed a crime here? Do you think that they were guilty of bribery?
I'm not a lawyer. What I would say, though, is if you look at the case of Governor McConnell in Virginia.
McDonnell.
Yes, McDonnell in Virginia. You look at Senator Menendez in New Jersey. There's no quid pro quos in those cases. They were simply prosecuted, and I think justifiably so, on the grounds that there was this pattern of gift giving, which led to beneficial
the one difference there, though, is that in the case of McDonnell in Virginia or Menendez, there's an indication that they took direct action themselves.
Correct.
There's no indication that Hillary Clinton or Bill Clinton took direct action. I mean, there's a coincidence, or some could say it's more than that, but you don't have the direct action.
Well, and I think they discovered the direct action in those cases once law enforcement began investigation. And that's my point. My point, and I think as you pointed out, I state this clearly in the book, I don't have subpoena power. I'm an author, but I'm looking at patterns of behavior and patterns of conduct of funds, and I'm saying this warrants further investigation.
All right, there's one other case. There are a lot more cases, but one other case I want to get into with you, and that is VCS Mining, which was a startup company which was granted for the first time in 50 years a permit for open pit gold mining in Haiti. One of the board members of VCS Mining was a fellow named Tony Rodham. There he is, Hillary Clinton's younger brother, who has absolutely no background in mining.
Right, exactly. And this is, again, another example where you see this timing question. Tony Rodham meets with VCS mining officials at a Clinton Global Initiative event in 2012. A couple of months later, they are granted a permit by the Haitian government, very difficult to get, only 2 of them granted in the last 50 years. And then lo and behold, Tony Rodham is added to the board. You could look at that and say it's coincidence, but again, as you see a chain of events repeated over and over again from Colombia to Kazakhstan to Africa, that's what I think is so troubling.
As I said, the Clinton campaign has gone hard after you and your book. Here is Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta.
He's cherry-picked.
Your response?
Well, they're not conspiracy theories. I don't engage in theorizing, and he's incorrect. I mean, one of the big finds in the book is that you have multi-million-dollar donations that were never disclosed. The thing that we have to keep in mind is the Clintons try to say that they're very transparent. The reason they are transparent with a foundation is the Barack Obama transition team in 2008 insisted on disclosure. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee insisted that they disclose donations, and as the Wall Street Journal and New York Times confirmed on Thursday, there are multi-million-dollar donations that were never disclosed. And those are the only ones we were able to find by going through Canadian tax records.
The Clinton camp notes that you worked for George W. Bush in his White House. They note that you also work for the conservative news website, Breitbart. And what they say, in effect, is this is a right-wing hit job.
Well, it's an interesting statement. The 2 previous books I've done, I did Throw Them All Out, which looked at insider trading and self-enrichment by members of Congress. And, I highlighted prominent Republicans, people like Dennis Hastert, the Republican chairman of the House Financial Services Committee and his stock trades. In the more recent book that I did, Extortion, I was criticized by John Boehner because I looked at some of his fundraising practices, which I consider extortive. So, the facts are the facts. And when we finished researching and writing this book, I went to the investigative units at the New York Times, Washington Post, at Fox News and ABC, precisely because I wanted this evidence to be evaluated and looked at, to not be seen in partisan terms. These are not cupcakes. These are not partisans. These are serious journalists, and they are confirming the reporting that we found.
Finally, is it true, because it's been reported this week, that you are looking into Jeb Bush's finance when he was governor of Florida? And if so, what have you found?
We've been looking at it for 4 months. We've got researchers on it, and we are continuing. We've actually talked previous to the book sort of coming out and being exposed. We've talked to media outlets. We're looking at everything from an airport deal in North Florida to land deals in South Florida to education fundings and the connections to Jeb Bush's Education Foundation and whatnot. We're not prepared to release that yet, but we will in the coming months.
Are you seeing connections between groups that have interest with the government and money coming in?
Yes. It's a common story, unfortunately. We see both sides of the aisle that engage in it. I think with the Clintons, of course, it's more global in scale just because they are global actors. But yes, there's no question that we see a similar pattern emerging. It's too soon to tell exactly the full ramifications of what those findings will be, but we'd be glad to come back and report on them.
We'll be glad to have you. Peter, thanks.